Ransom kept his eyes fixed upon the enemy, but it took no notice of him. Its eyes moved like the eyes of a living man, but it was hard to be sure what it was looking at, or whether it really used the eyes as organs of vision at all. One got the impression of a force that cleverly kept the pupils of those eyes fixed in a suitable direction while the mouth talked, but which, for its own purpose, used wholly different modes of perception. The thing sat down close to the lady's head on the far side of her from Ransom, if you could call it sitting down. The body did not reach its squatting position by the normal movements of a man. It was more as if some external force maneuvered it into the right position and then let it drop. It was impossible to point to any particular motion which was definitely non-human. Ransom had the sense of watching an imitation of living motions which had been very well studied and was technically correct, but somehow it lacked the master's touch. And he was chilled with an inarticulate, night nursery horror of the thing he had to deal with, the man-aged corpse, the bogey, the Unman. There was nothing to do but watch, to sit there forever if need be, guarding the lady from the Unman while their island climbed interminably over the Alps and the Andes of burnished water. All three were very still. Beasts and birds came often and looked upon them. Hours later, the Unman began to speak. It did not even look in Ransom's direction. Slowly and cumbrously, as if by some machinery that needed oiling, it made its mouth and lips pronounce his name. "Ransom," it said. "Well?" said Ransom. "Nothing," said the Unman. He shot an inquisitive glance at it. Was the creature mad? But it looked, as before, dead rather than mad, sitting there with the head bowed and the mouth a little open, and some yellow dust from the moss settled in the creases of its cheeks, and the legs crossed tailor-wise, and the hands with their long metallic-looking nails pressed flat together on the ground before it. He dismissed the problem from his mind and returned to his own uncomfortable thoughts. "Ransom," it said again. "What is it?" said Ransom sharply. "Nothing," it answered. Again there was silence, and again, about a minute later, the horrible mouth said, "Ransom." This time he had made no reply. Another minute, and it uttered his name again, and then, like a minute gun, "Ransom! Ransom! Ransom!" perhaps 100 times. "What the hell do you want?" he roared at last. "Nothing," said the voice. Next time he determined not to answer, but when it had called him on 1,000 times, he found himself answering whether he would or no, and "Nothing," came the reply. He taught himself to keep silent in the end. Not that the torture of resisting the impulse to speak was less than the torture of response, but because something within him rose up to combat the tormentor's assurance that he must yield in the end. If the attack had been of some more violent kind, it might have been easier to resist. What chilled him and almost cowed him was the union of malice with something nearly childish. For temptation, for blasphemy, for a whole battery of horrors, he was in some sort prepared, but hardly for this petty, indefectible nagging as of a nasty little boy at preparatory school. Indeed, no imagined horror could have surpassed the sense which grew with him as the slow hours passed, that this creature was, by all human standards, inside out. Its heart on the surface and its shallowness at the heart. On the surface, great designs and an antagonism to heaven which involved the fate of worlds. But deep within, when every veil had been pierced, was there, after all, nothing but a black puerility, an aimless spitefulness content to sate itself with the tiniest cruelties, as love does not disdain the smallest kindness? What kept him steady, long after all possibility of thinking about something else had disappeared, was the decision that if he must either hear the word ransom or the word nothing 1,000,000 times, he would prefer the word ransom. Then all at once it was night. "Ransom! Ransom! Ransom! Ransom!" went on the voice, and suddenly it crossed his mind that though he would sometime require sleep, the unman might not.